Hi, everyone. So, wow, this is a change in classroom circumstances, but we'll try and get through it together, okay? If you have questions at any point, feel free to just write to me at any time, and I'll be happy to help out in any way I can. So, today, for today's class, you're going to need three things. You're going to need our PowerPoint, and you're going to need the syllabus / workbook, which looks like this if you picked up your printed out one. But there's also a copy in the Dropbox for you, a digital copy. And the third thing will be access to the Google Doc, where we will be brainstorming some ideas on how we want to develop the short story Idle Days on the Yann. So let's just start with the PowerPoint. All right, let's take a look here at all of our classes, class 1 through 10. So today we're going to do class 1 and 2, and we'll go through the course introduction, what we're doing, and then we're going to have a discussion of Idle Days on the Yann. How are we going to have a discussion, you ask? Well, we're going to have that discussion in our Google Doc. So while I'm doing the PowerPoint presentation, I would like for you guys to take notes and think about ideas within the short story that you could expand upon or drill into to turn into your semester project. Class 2, we're going to talk about what's a treatment. Not just what a treatment is, but specifically we're going to talk about what a premise is, and talk about what the roles for the semester projects will be, okay? Class 3, we're going to get into log lines, premises, and summaries and how to write them. Class 4, we're going to go over what's in a story, what makes a good story, quote unquote good story, and story paradigms. Class 5, we'll talk about world building and writing world building. So in your seminar, you talked about world building in a more abstract way, in a more theoretical way, historical way. And now we're going to talk about ways of writing and working with world building. Same thing with characters. We're going to walk through how to develop characters, and I'm going to specifically focus on creating the bad ones because that's my favorite. Class 7, we're going to talk about 5-act structure and what a beat sheet is. Class 8, we're going to watch the pilot episode of Scandal. It's called Sweet Baby. And class 9 and 10 are both going to be case studies on writing Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and Act 5 in a television series. So do for today that you will have read Idle Days on the Yann, that you will also have read George R.R. Martin's treatment for Game of Thrones. And I also want to do platform checks again. Ha ha ha. So I would like for you guys to be ready in class with your social media stats. And what I'm really interested in are what platforms are working for you, which ones are not working for you, which ones have sort of garnered more likes and followers than others. And I really just want really quick updates from each of you. So the way I want to do that, now that we are streaming our classes, I would like for you each to email me a copy of your social media spreadsheet with the updated numbers, and then send me a line or two about what's working for you and what's not working for you, okay? So email that to me at Leanne, Leanne, at southgateschool.dk. Great. So here are our class goals. Platform check, which you're going to email to me. And then we're going to do a discussion of idle days on the Yann. Then we'll take a break and we'll go on to our second class, which will be components of a treatment and roles and projects. So for your platform check, how many likes do you have on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, LinkedIn? Update that social media tracking spreadsheet and send it to me in an email. Make sure the subject line says social media tracking spreadsheet. And, give me a nice greeting and then give me a 1 or 2 sentence update on what's working for you. Okay. Also, don't forget to save this document in your Dropbox for your semester exam. Okay, so we're going to talk through the following points about idle days on the Yann. We're going to talk about 6 specific things, and as we do it, I really want you guys to brainstorm and take notes on potential ideas that you can use to develop for your semester project. So you can develop story world, you can develop maybe game plot, goals, characters, story spin-offs, figurines, play sets, blogs, newspaper articles, anything that fits into a transmedia world, particularly in relation to idle days on the Yann. So we're going to look at background, we're going to look at location, plot, characters, reception, and transmedia ideas. So if I haven't said it already 3 or 4 times, take notes. Okay. I think you're going to find that Idle Days on the Yann is a really cool short story to be working with. Now, before I move through the background, I just want to call your attention to your workbook on page 9. You can look in your workbook on page 9 right now. Let me just get us there here on the video. Okay, on page 9, you'll see Idle Days on the Yann discussion. And so while I'm giving this presentation, you can follow along in your workbook here and take down notes of different things: the background, location, the plot, the characters, reception, and transmedia ideas. Of course, I realize I just completely skipped going over the syllabus. So how about I back up and we do that real quick, okay? So let's take a look at your syllabus and workbook for this semester. I made a workbook for each of the 3 classes that I'm teaching you guys. Here you have the table of contents, which has your syllabus, and then it goes through class 1 and 2, class 3 and 4, class 5 and 6, class 7 and 8, class 9 and 10, and then you have a whole bunch of appendices. Appendix A in your workbook is the short story, Idle Days on the Yann. Appendix B is story structure paradigms. Appendix C talks about rhetorical appeals. Appendix D, we're going to use that when we develop characters. Appendix E is the script for the Scandal pilot called Sweet Baby. And Appendix F is the treatment for Game of Thrones. Okay, so here's your syllabus. It's the first couple pages of your workbook. Starts on page 3. So the Toolbox class this semester is, the goal is to simulate a real-world writer's room in which you guys will work on a mothership text, and that mothership text being Idle Days on the Yann. And what I want you to do with that is turn it into a serial and transmedia project by turning it into, and it's going to be a 3-part TV miniseries. I'm going to correct this right now and I'll resave it onto your Dropbox. 3-part TV miniseries. And that you're going to do in partners, in groups, in partners. You're going to partner up and write 3 episodes for a mini-series. In addition to that mini-series, you will each develop 2 other forms of transmedia. So for example, a game, action figures, a prequel, sequel, sidequel, theater production, interactive work. It could be a map a la Middle Earth, or a genealogy, a play set. It can be a blog, it could be newspaper articles. Now, are you going to have to actually write a prequel, like a 300-page book? No, you're going to write a treatment for it. So your secondary projects will be treatments. Some of the treatments, you will also include mock-ups with them, okay? One of the secondary projects it says must make use of Tlaykenton's makerspace. That right now is not a sure thing because Tlaykenton is closed. So we'll see what happens. If Tlaykenton does not reopen, then of course you won't have to use makerspace. In regards to the secondary projects, yeah, if you guys want to get into groups and work on secondary projects together, that's fine. So if, let's say, Alicia, let's say you and Marina and Tlina want to develop an idea for a theater production, then the 3 of you would work together on writing a treatment for a theater production. So that would count as 1 project for each of you. But now each of you needs 1 other project. So, Alicia, maybe you want to work on something by yourself. So maybe you go off and you want to work on a blog series a la the Watson Chronicles. You can do that by yourself. Or maybe you want to pull Pauline into that. So maybe you and Pauline work on a blog series. That would count as Pauline's first project, and it would count as your second project. Pauline, you could then go work on a project by yourself, or you could get in touch with Joanna, Nicolina, and E, and you guys could all maybe develop a game together. Do you see how that works? Each of you has to work on 2 projects, but how you work on them with whomever is entirely up to you, okay? As the class goes on, I want you to also be thinking about secondary projects. So what would make a really good secondary project in relation to Idle Days on the Yann, okay? So this exam is worth 15 ECTS points. It's combining Toolbox and Practicum. It's both group and individual exams, and you'll have 4 deliverables. You'll write a treatment as a group for the mini-series, and you'll have you're going to write 1 overall treatment as a group. And that overall treatment, that document, will include writing about the mini-series, and then also you're going to write about each of your 2 projects, okay? So an overall group treatment, that's the first deliverable. Then each of you will write part of a mini-series, that's your second document. And then each of you will write a treatment plus maybe mock-ups of 2 secondary projects. So that's 4 deliverables that will go into your exam. Exam details. So the treatment, otherwise known as a story Bible, and I've given you some examples of story Bibles, and we will look through more story Bibles and the ones that I've given you. And within that treatment, you're going to have a lot of different components, but here are some of the ones that you can include. A log line, 6 sentences, which is pretty much the maximum, describing what your project is. And by your project, I mean what is the TV series that you're going to be writing about. a paragraph on world description, a paragraph on central message or theme. What is your project trying to say? So this central theme must be supported in all of the projects, even the secondary projects. You'll do a character sketch, one character sketch for main characters. Minor characters are referenced basically within one paragraph descriptions, but they're not developed in this treatment. You'll do one-page episode outlines, providing the A storyline and then suggesting B and C storylines. And then lastly, main story arcs for characters. So what do they learn? How do they change? And where do they end up? Okay, that's everything that goes into the treatment. During the reading week, you had to read the story Bible for Stranger Things. It's called Montauk. You also read the story Bible for Fargo and also for Grey's Anatomy. And just by reading those three, you probably saw that they've all been written a little bit differently. You will emulate one of those. So you look at that and use that as your example. Okay, so the second deliverable is a 4-episode TV series, mini-series. Each of you is responsible in a pair, like with a partner, to write a 35 to 60-minute television episode. Right, I should have deleted this, so I'm going to update this. Okay. Basically, in TV and film land, the way that scripts are formatted is 1 minute per page. So if you want to write a 60-minute episode, you're pretty much writing 60 pages. So that would mean that each person, so there are 2 people writing episode 1, and if it were going to be 60 minutes, then each person would write 30 pages. Mind you, there's a lot of white space when writing scripts. But I would generally aim for about 40. But there are some really great new series out now that are like 25, 30 minutes. So I'm open. I need you guys, after you decide who your showrunner will be, you can decide how long you want each episode to be, then split it in half, and that's how many pages you personally will write for your episode. All right? The third one, you can choose any 2 of the following options. You can write a prequel, so you would write a short treatment for a work that expands or extends your project prior to the events of your project. A sidequel, a short treatment for a work that develops a minor character. A video game, perhaps, a short treatment for a video game that allows the player to participate in your project story or story world. Focus on the storyline. You could also do an idea for a board game. So you could write a short treatment for a game that allows players to enact the story of your project. And here you would focus more on mechanics. You could also do action figures or toys, etc., that focus on characters. You were showing us last semester some of your character sketches, like your illustrations. So this could be something maybe that you're interested in doing. I know quite a few of you illustrate. So if you want to work on developing illustrations of characters within Idle Days on Leon, that's also an option. You could do a play. You could write a treatment for the play and maybe write a scene from that play. You can do an interactive work. This can be an interactive transmedia project. Use your imagination. You could do a clothing line. You could do perfume, nail polish, or other forms of fashion. You could do a map or genealogy. That's Ella growling in the background. You could design a play set or anything else that Idle Days on the Yawn, the short story, inspires from you, and that connects with your project's mothership narrative, if you will. Okay, so let's move forward. The roles for this semester, we're going to need one person to be the continuity executive. This person is in charge of gathering and implementing notes across works and maintaining continuity. You're going to look at continuity, cohesion, and coherence. This person can participate in writing the TV miniseries, but they should also be maybe writing on a little bit limited capacity. So they should work with someone who wants to really pound out the keys. Okay. The continuity, then we have the executive producer who's in charge of gathering and presenting final marketing plan and production pitch. So the executive producer has to know all the projects, not just the group project, but all the secondary projects. And this person will also participate in the writing. Okay, so those two people are going to basically be the leaders of the group project. So those two people, it will probably take a little bit more work, but hopefully you pair up with someone who is at your level of engagement, or you pair up with someone who can write a little bit more than you. All right. Then we have the writer's room, and that's where the rest of you are going to break up into partners and work on writing these 3 TV series episodes, okay? So let me change this to 3 scripts. So you guys will divide into partners and write 3 scripts. You can already start thinking about who you might want to work with on this, and maybe reach out to someone or reach out as a group and talk about who you think you might work well with. Okay. Right. So the continuity executive and the executive producer / showrunner, they'll have a larger workload, so they should be expected to write just a little bit less. I mean, you can write in equal parts if you're up for it, of course. All right. The required reading assignments for this week: Idle Days on the Yawn, Scandal Sweet Baby, what is 5-act structure and how do you use it, and then the 3 story Bibles. So if you go to the next page, this is page 5, you can see that the times and the dates of all of our classes I've listed here. So I've given you a list of them, but also a visual. What I'm trying to do here is I hope that maybe this visual and the list answers some of the things that came up in the student board meeting in the fall. So maybe this helps just a little bit. Okay, so here's some class details to go through. Your project, hereafter we call it YP. YP will use Lord Dunsany's short story, Idle Days on the Yawn, as the mothership. Think about, what do you want to repeat? What do you want to vary? Look at the lesson posters that we did from the genre class and begin brainstorming ideas. Treatment outline. What is your project and how can you break it down? Discuss roles and formatting treatment. What are some core details of your project that would be cool for people to explore? What kind of background would you like fans to delve into? And here we'll also discuss TV script plotting and formatting. Identify franchise opportunities and specific intellectual properties. What can be turned into passive income from your project? You guys know I love that stuff. How will you leave your story world open so that you can build sequels, prequels, sidequels, and even more? And what kind of immediate opportunities do you see? Number 6, what alternate versions might exist? So can you create a children's book, a manga, a coloring book, or something of that sort? What kind of social event or space can you create, like an escape room, a pub, a theme park, or some other attraction? All of these ideas can be secondary projects for the semester. Number 8, what stories can be told from other characters' point of view? Minor characters, antagonists, etc. Can you tell a story from another perspective? Number 9, what world does your project take place in? So we know Idle Days on the Yawn takes place in a dream world. Are you going to stay in that dream world, or are you going to move the world somewhere else? What vivid details can you introduce? So genealogies, maps, creatures, vehicles, maybe the flora and the fauna, for example. Number 10, what character arcs are involved in your project? Do the characters develop enough? Do they need more works to conclude their arc? And by more works, does that maybe this is just, yeah, maybe you need more than 3 episodes to tell this story, right? So maybe you're only writing season 1, but your characters actually need 5 seasons to complete their arc. So keep that in mind. What kinds of changes do they go through, and what kinds of changes are in their future? Yep, here's some further reading if you're interested. Story by Robert McGee and Shonda Rhimes' Masterclass on masterclass.com, although we'll be watching part of that in class. Okay. Great. So here we are at class 1 and 2 again. So before class, you've read George Martin's treatment, Game of Thrones, and Idle Days on the Yawn. And what we want to do is a very slow reading. As you're reading through the story, you want to brainstorm. Take out, if you picked up the printed copy, or if you can print your own copy, take out colored pens and pencils, or get some sticky notes or something, and read through it again. Do it really slowly. Then start brainstorming. What do you want to repeat, vary? Are there points that maybe you want to expand within the story? So, for example, they make a few stops along the Yann, and they don't necessarily explore every little village that they stop in, but you could explore it. What about the mood? If you don't like the dreamlike quality, you can change it, right? What's the theme? Do you want to continue this theme? Do you want to change it? Maybe you want to evolve it. Again, look at the lesson posters from our genre class. I have pictures of all of them, so I can post those in our Facebook group. What can you engage with as a sequel, prequel, sidequel, portal, time travel, in-world expansion, etc.? Anything that would make a good game, maybe a figurine, an ad campaign, merchandise. You can develop a genealogy or a map. So make notes on the text of the story itself, okay? Great. So here in the workbook, again, we've gone through these goals. You can doodle inside your workbook and you can color. Okay, now we're at the Idle Days on the Yawn discussion, so I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. Here we go. Okay, so we are now at Idle Days on the Yawn, and This is a short story written by an Irish writer named Lord Dunsany. His full name is Edward Eddie Plunkett. It was published in a short story collection called A Dreamer's Tales in 1910 and Tales of Three Hemispheres in 1919. And Sidney Simi illustrated the story with only 2 images. Dunsany wrote 2 sequel stories, both published in 1912. And Lovecraft actually took inspiration from Idle Days on the Yawn for several of his stories. We'll talk a little bit about that later on today. His background in his autobiography, which is called Patches of Sunlight, which was published in 1938, Dunsany explained the background to the setting of Idle Days on the Yawn as this combination of biblical readings, an interest in Greco-Roman antiquity, having briefly seen Tangier at the turn of the century, and also his father told him stories about his travels to Egypt. He also was impacted by Rudyard Kipling's fiction at a pretty young age. And he also had experiences from South Africa during the Second Boer War. Idle Days on the Yawn, in particular, was written in anticipation for a trip down the Nile, which is kind of interesting because, as you're reading Idle Days on the Yawn, did it evoke that feeling of the Nile for you guys? Like, what river were you comparing it to when you were reading it? So here, I think you guys are going to enjoy this part. So, by knowing Lord Dunsany and his interests and his life, you start to get insight into things that you can develop for Idle Days on the Yawn in terms of creating this authentic feeling world, but also as like a shout out to the super fans, right? So this information I just took from Wikipedia, so you can also look it up yourself. But aside from his literary work, Dunsany was a really good chess player. He actually played Jose Raul Capablanca to a draw and also invented something called Dunsany's chess, which is an asymmetric chess variant that is notable for not involving any fairy pieces, unlike many variants that require the player to learn unconventional piece movements. He was president of both the Irish Chess Union and the Kent County Chess Association for some years. So how could chess actually help you expand this transmedia world? You could actually create a chess game with pieces that look like Dunsany. No, I don't know. But the idea of when you think of like Game of Thrones, for example, like everybody's trying to win the throne, and it's very Shakespearean, right? So Dunsany had a mind for chess and chess movement and strategy. So that could really tie in really well with your projects this semester. He was also a really good horseman and hunter, and he hosted the local hunt for many years. He also hunted in parts of Africa, and he was a pistol shooting champion in Ireland. But interestingly, he also campaigned for animal rights, and he was especially opposed to how they how they chop off dogs' tails. So he was against, it's called docking. So he was against docking, and he established and became president of the RSPCA in his later years. He also played cricket, and he was a scout. Shout out to Trina. Um, but so, he was really into the outdoors and the Scouting Association. He also, shout out to Tlina, supported the amateur drama group, the Shoreham Players. Yep, Dunsany provided support for the British Legion in both Ireland and Kent, including grounds in Trim and poetry for the Irish branch's annual memorial service on a number of occasions. And here I'm basically saying, hey, shout out to the nerds, because all of this stuff you can incorporate as part of drillability, right? Right. All right, let's go to the next slide. If I can get us there. There we go. So the opening paragraph of The Hoard of the Ghibellines, which is from the Book of Wonder in 1912, gives a really good indication of both the tone and tenor of Dunsany's style at the time. So I'm just going to read this. The Ghibellines eat, as is well known, nothing less good than man. Their evil tower is joined to terra cognita, to the lands we know, by a bridge. Their hoard is beyond reason. Avarice has no use for it. They have a separate cellar for emeralds and a separate cellar for sapphires. They have filled a hole with gold and dig it up when they need it. And the only use that is known for their ridiculous wealth is to attract their larder a continual supply of food. In times of famine, they have even been known to scatter rubies abroad, a little trail of them to some city of man, and sure enough, their larders would soon be full again. So, a side note, I have started a vocabulary list for you guys, which I will talk about later, not right now. But you'll see the word avarice and larder have already been put into that vocabulary list. I'd love for you guys to start filling in this vocabulary list with all the new words that you learned this semester. Okay. Dunsany's most notable fantasy short stories were published in collections from 1905 to 1919, though some of you know this, that fantasy wasn't actually a genre yet. So at the time, they were just this curious form of literature. Interestingly, he paid for his first publication, The Gods of Pagania, and he earned a commission on sales. So he self-published. So he never had to do that again because his writing sold so well. The stories in his first two books and perhaps the beginning of his third were set within this invented world of Pagania, and it had its own gods, its own history, and its own geography. And that's where we heard about the Ghibellines and their extreme wealth. So the second point is location. So again, in Dunsany's autobiography, Patches of Sunlight, he explained the background to this setting as a combination of what I already went through, these biblical readings, this Greco-Roman antiquity, seeing Tangier, hearing of his dad's trip and travels through Egypt, Rudyard Kipling, but also being, engaged in war. The third point is plot. Here, what's interesting is this animation is actually interesting. I don't know why it's doing that. Anyway, in Idle Days on the Yann, there's no tension. There's no real progression. It's not characterization. It's not story. It's not plot, like as in action and adventure, right? So we have like point A to point Z, and we go from the River Yann to Mandaroon to Astahan to Perdondaris to Nen to the Gates of Yann. So it's just a very like chronological story. It could be a road trip movie. It could be anything. And that's why Steen and I picked this short story. It really could be turned into an epic. It could be turned into adventure, detection, romance, mystery, soap drama, musical. It just has to have this surreal fantasy world, right? Or does it? Because we saw what happened in Mr. Sherlock, right? Or Mr. Holmes, Mr. Sherlock. Like how that movie went from detective to drama, right? So does Idle Days on the Yawn have to stay within this surreal, dreamlike fantasy world? You guys have to decide. And you aren't constricted by a narrative that's set up or by a plot paradigm, okay? We're going to go through plot paradigms, but you can choose anything you want. So it can be point A to point Z, or it can be like this image on the right, and it can be a choose your own adventure type narrative. So the fourth point is characters. And with characters, you know, we have an unnamed protagonist. We've got sailors, we've got the captain, we've got natives. What about Sheol Nuganoth? When everybody on board the ship prays to their gods, our unnamed protagonist, he decides to pray to Sheol Nuganoth. This is this obscure and abandoned god. So Shub Niggurath is often associated with the phrase, the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young. And that one is a deity in the Cthulhu mythos by H.P. Lovecraft. So he, you know, obviously people think that he was influenced by Lord Dunsany by taking Sheol Nuganoth and turning Sheol Nuganoth into Shub Niggurath. So we see Shub Niggurath is first mentioned in Lovecraft's revision story, The Last Test. She's not described by Lovecraft, but she's frequently mentioned or called upon in like incantations. Incantations could be another, you could write a book of incantations that our unnamed protagonist collected on his trip down the Yann, for example. Could be another secondary project. But you can see here with this particular abandoned god how it influenced H.P. Lovecraft. Okay. Number 5 is reception and transmedia. Dunsany wrote 2 sequels to the story, The Shop in Go-By Street and The Avenger of Perdonderis. So both of them were published in 1912 and included together with the original story in a book, Tales of Three Hemispheres. In the sequels, the same narrator tries to return to the lands of Dream to revisit the crew from the Bird of the River, but has trouble getting there. The stories further explore Dunsany's conception of poetic imagination as an intermediary between the ordinary world and the lands of myths and dreams, as well as the view that all these worlds are illusions. So we see the surface plot of H.P. Lovecraft's 1919 short story, The White Ship, is modeled on Idle Days on the Yawn. Unlike Dunsany, Lovecraft made his tale allegorical and included philosophical themes. So if you guys want to include some philosophical themes, you know, please feel free to do so. So I have a list here on this slide, but if you look in the lecture notes, you'll see a lot more information on Dunsany's influence on other authors. So we have H.P. Lovecraft, we have Jorge Luis Borges, who you guys read last semester. We've got Tolkien, We've got Guillermo del Toro, Neil Gaiman, Arthur C. Clarke, Ursula K. Le Guin, and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Okay, on that note, I would like you guys to now head on over to the shared Google Doc. And on the shared Google Doc, let me just switch over to show you. You'll see that it says brainstorming at the top here. Group brainstorming ideas that come up from discussing Idle Days on the Yawn by Lord Dunsany. So what I'd like for you guys to do is in this area right here, just start, typing out ideas that come to mind about, the kind of narrative or story arc you might want to develop out of this short story. You can include what genre or subgenre you want to turn it into, or which direction you want to take it. For example, will there be puppets? Will there be creatures? Idle Days on the Yawn is the perfect short story if you want to create and expand on the flora and the fauna and the creatures of the world, right? Okay, and then here, part 1, secondary project ideas. So as you have read, through Idle Days on the Yawn, what secondary project ideas have come up for you? So write those here in this section. Okay. Go do that right now.